What's up, party people? It's me, Rich, and I'm back again with another episode of Behind the Counter 2.0. It's been 36 days since I've had caffeine, and that is pretty nuts. I feel great. Also, the weather's getting nice. I've been hooping like almost every day. Feeling pretty good. Be happy for you, boy. This week, we have a very special guest. I've been wanting to talk to him for many years, ever since I started the show, and finally we made it happen. This week's guest is none other than Ron Marz. Check it out. Hey guys, welcome to the show. Ron Marz. Ron, how are you today?
I'm good, Rich. How are you?
I am not doing terrible. We had a little chat before the show started about how brick cold it is in New York.
Brick is one of the words for it. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's the polite company word for it.
It's fucking cold out.
Yeah, I think everybody's. It's
Yeah.
funny. Like I was talking to some of the other
Mhm.
people I work with at Blizzard, and
Mhm.
my comic guys around here, and it's just like everybody's done.
Yeah.
Everybody's had
Yeah.
enough, and we're not even to the end of February yet. I think it's just been such a grind. I'm ready for. I'm going to Kentucky in a few weeks for a convention, and I'm ready to, not be wearing a winter jacket.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's you know what it is for me, it's the wind, and it's been so windy lately. It's just it's abominable. Um
The wind is the worst. The wind
yeah.
cuts through you.
So, Ron, thank you so much. I've been trying to get you on for a while. I really appreciate you coming on. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about, and my notes are a little out of order. Do you mind talking about older stuff?
Whatever you want. I am an open book.
Okay.
I am an
Cross
open comic book.
cross gen.
What would you like to know?
I
We
okay.
could do about
So
5 hours on cross-gen.
okay. So cross gen came out. I was maybe in like our early 20s when it came out. Loved it. Right. Loved all this stuff. Sojourn, one of my favorite books from cross gen, which was your book, right? Now my question is, was that stuff just outright owned by CrossGen and then bought by Marvel, or did you have a stake in anything?
Um, if you were an employee at CrossGen, if you were
Hmm.
a staff employee, which most everybody that worked there was,
Yeah.
uh, you had an ownership stake in the company.
Hmm.
And the longer you had been with the company, the bigger your stake was. You got,
Okay.
I don't know, it's half a percentage point when you joined and
Hmm.
all the way up to so everybody that worked there had ownership in the company and the properties.
Hmm.
The company owned the properties, but you
Okay.
were a part owner of the company, so you had participation
Hmm.
essentially. Um, but when the whole thing was sold off to Disney, lock,
Hmm.
stock, and barrel, we got nothing because it was a fire sale basically.
Hmm.
So, um, so we were invested in our properties in a very literal sense, but when the thing goes swirling down the drain,
Yeah.
nobody gets nothing.
So I mean that's wildly unfortunate because I remember when it got bought by Disney, I think me and a lot of other guys that I know and a lot of fans were like, "Hey, this stuff is going to be finished. It's going to be great. We're going to get the end of Sojourn." Did that never manifested?
No,
Mhm.
Disney essentially bought the stuff because they were interested in a couple specific properties.
Okay.
They were interested in Abadazad, which was the James DeMatteis, Mike Ploog book, which was
Right.
great.
Yeah.
They're interested to a lesser extent in Meridian.
Hmm.
And then, because these could be franchises. That's what
Right.
Disney does. Um, and they actually, Disney's other publishing arms did a couple of Abadazad sort of jewel books, the kind of series of unfortunate events
Okay.
size books that came out, didn't really set the market on fire, and then they went, hell with it. Um,
Yeah.
and the stuff just went on a shelf and has been essentially forgotten for the most part. Marvel did a few sort of revamp attempts on some of the
Mhm.
properties that I think ended up being for nobody because
Okay.
because new fans who were unfamiliar with the original cross-gen stuff didn't want it
Hmm.
because it was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And then the old cross-gen fans, uh, the stuff got changed enough in concept that it was no longer what they wanted. So it
Right.
was it was ultimately neither fish nor fowl. It was this conglomeration that didn't please anybody, and
Hmm.
those just sort of, died a fairly quiet death. And now I guess the latest is Marvel's putting out some omnibuses of the original cross-gen material.
Hmm.
They did Sigil as the first one, which is an odd choice, and I don't know really why they made that.
Uh,
And then Mystic. So my all my Mystic issues are in a big fat 1200 page hardcover or whatever it
wow.
is. And we'll see if there are any more. I was actually in touch with the reprint editor for some of the stuff, and I asked if they were doing more, and the editor was like, I don't know, they haven't told me.
Wow.
Uh, so we'll see. Hopefully at least that original material can see the light of day.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just there's no there's no one to be an advocate for it,
Hmm.
uh, either at Disney or Marvel, because nobody that had anything to do with it is around anymore. As a staff person, and really a lot of that stuff doesn't see the light of day again unless somebody's really agitating for it.
Yeah.
At one point there was a discussion of me writing a cross-gen miniseries that brought
Hmm.
all of the characters together and would have been part of the Secret Wars crossover that
Yeah.
was done, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago or whenever that was. Um, and we got to the point of putting
Hmm.
together a storyline and figuring out which characters were going to be involved, figuring out who was going to draw it, and then the editor that was handling that got rounded up to the West Coast, and the whole thing just died, immediately because
Wow.
there was nobody else to pick up the torch and carry it. So
Yeah.
maybe someday, I don't know. Nostalgia. We're in the nostalgia window right now. It's about 20 years, so that's usually the window
Hmm.
of I liked this when I was 14.
Yeah.
Now I'm 35 and I have disposable income. I want it again. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Or, like I liked this when I was 14, and then somebody's an executive somewhere who says, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, everything in this business is cyclical.
yeah, and it's interesting, like it sounds like just everything, I've been doing the show for a while, and everybody has such a different story with stuff that they create, and it just seems like the cross-gen stuff was almost akin to the stuff that Marvel did with Malibu Comics, where they bought Malibu Comics and just did nothing with any of that stuff.
Well, I mean, Marvel bought Malibu mostly for the coloring, for the
Yeah.
color studio that came along with
Hmm.
it. With CrossGen, you know, Marvel didn't buy CrossGen, Disney did.
Okay.
So there
Yeah.
was so there was more than one degree of
Hmm.
separation in it. And I mean, for a long time, I don't think anybody at Disney even knew they owned CrossGen. It
Wow.
was, there were specific aspects that they wanted, and the
Hmm.
rest of it was just kind of ignored. At one point, there was, a lot of the original art from the first issues of this various series.
Yeah.
Um, was owned by the company. Like I think the artist got some sort of buyout for the art,
Hmm.
but the company owned all of the original boards for the
Wow.
first issues. And when the company got sold, all of that stuff was sitting in flat files in the office. And so all of that art, when Disney came in and
Hmm.
essentially went, well, we want this stuff, office furniture can go. We don't care about any of that stuff. All of that art ended up being shipped up to the offices of Hyperion Publishing, which was a Disney arm, in New York City, and sat on the
Hmm.
floor for a few years because nobody knew what it was, nobody
Yeah.
cared, and so literally there was a stack of original art like this sitting on the floor under somebody's desk until it finally um, a guy met a guy who knew a guy, and eventually,
Hmm.
word of it made its way to an art dealer, um, Spencer Beck in Connecticut,
Hmm.
who, and anybody at Hyperion was like, well, we don't give a shit about this stuff. This
Wow.
means nothing to us.
Hmm.
So a lot of the artists who had ended up donating or, doing a cheap buyout for their first issues ended up getting that artwork back,
Wow.
eventually.
Yeah.
Um, and which now means it's all scattered to the winds again.
Yeah, more than likely, right? I appreciate the input. That's fantastic. I love what your shells are doing right now. You're clearly a fan. Did you grow up a comic fan?
Yeah, my journey
Mm,
was the same as everybody else's, which is
mm,
you read comics and you pull them off the spinner rack as a kid, and you get to about 14 or 15, and you discover girls and cars, and then comics
mm,
aren't so interesting anymore. So that was my thing. I had probably 12 or 13 or 14, and decided, well, comics are for
mm.
kids. I don't, that's kid stuff. I don't need those anymore.
Yeah.
And ignored comics until like the end of my senior year in high school. I stumbled
Mm,
across some stuff that was, like the Miller Daredevil and Simonson Thor, just on a spinner rack in a convenience store,
yeah.
and went, oh, this is different than I remember. So I got drawn back in because of that stuff, and then not, very shortly after, Dark Knight and Watchmen hit, and I got pulled back in, and
Mm.
not long after that, I was doing them professionally.
What was that like breaking into the industry at that time?
Um,
'Cause your bibliography is insane.
yeah, I haven't had a real job in a long time, so or maybe ever when you think about it. Yeah, I mean, I broke in because Jim Starlin was and is a buddy, and took
Mhm.
me by the hand and said, "Hey, do you want to write Marvel Comics?" Well, duh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I when Jim Starlin says, "Do you want to write comics?" You actually get to write comics. So he took me by the hand and showed me the ropes of how to write a script, and introduced me around at Marvel. Jim co-wrote my first few scripts with me to kind of show me the way.
Yeah.
And then I was doing it on my own, and have been literally employed doing comics ever since.
That's amazing. So, like I said, I'm going to jump around a little bit. So, Jim Starlin, right? Famous for some of the greatest cosmic stories of all time. Was Emerald Twilight almost a kind of like a, not a tribute to Jim Starlin, but kind of like influenced by, let's say, your mentor maybe and your friend?
No, not really. I
Okay.
mean, I had when I got the offer to do Green Lantern,
Hmm.
I had been working at Marvel for, I don't know, 3, 4 years at that point,
Uh,
and had done a little bit of work at DC
hmm.
in the Green Lantern office on short stories and stuff like that, for the quarterly Green Lantern specials.
Hmm.
Um, and then I got a call one night, literally 7 o'clock at night, saying, "Do you want to take over Green Lantern?"
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, okay. And then the other shoe dropped, which was, "This is what we want your first story to be. You're gonna get rid of Hal Jordan and make up a new Green Lantern." So the broad strokes of Emerald Twilight were given to me, were,
Okay.
the page and a half of notes that said, you know, Hal goes off the edge, and wrecks the core, and wrecks the Guardians, and
Hmm.
and then kills Sinestro, and at the end of it, there's a new Green Lantern that you get to make up. So it was literally page and a half of notes, and I built the story from there.
Yeah.
So it was DC handed me a skeleton to hang the flesh on.
Hmm.
But it wasn't really inspired by Jim in that sense, although I certainly see the sort of tortured hero kind of stuff
Hmm.
that Jim is so good at, whether it's tortured anti-hero like Thanos, or Warlock, or Surfer.
Hmm.
There are definitely similarities. I mean, maybe that stuff was subconscious on my part, um, but it was also a story that DC asked for, and so I gave them that story to the best of my ability.
That's fascinating. It's one of my favorites. But that also that hit at the pocket where I think I was like 13 or 14, and all my buddies say even now are like Kyle Rayner's like our Green Lantern. Like that's our guy.
Well, yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's I think Green Lantern, more than almost any other franchise in comics, like, it's the one that you discover at the right age.
Yeah.
It's the one that sticks with you, because it's a multiple choice test.
Right.
You get to pick your favorite, and you guys were the right age that
Mhm.
Kyle was the one, and the people that came after you, probably a lot of them are John Stewart guys, because John Stewart was the one that you saw most often in the animated stuff that everybody grew up
Yeah.
with. So, it's yeah, it's kind of cool that Green Lantern is a is a, pick your flavor off the smorgasbord kind of franchise
Mhm.
when most of the others are not.
Yeah, no, I love that about DC because DC I feel like has more legacy characters than Marvel.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's whatever age group. It's like what like your favorite cast of Saturday Night Live, like whatever your formative years, like that's gonna be your favorite cast, that's gonna be your favorite Green Lantern, that's gonna be your favorite Batman sidekick or whatever. Um, Now you've worked on tons of DC and Marvel stuff. Um, Marvel versus DC, like was that another thing that Marvel would that was pitched to you, or was it, hey, I have an idea for this?
Yeah, that's again the sort of thing where you get a phone call and
Mm,
they tell you, well, we're going to do this. Do you want in on it? I actually I did pitch an Avengers JLA crossover to Marvel
mm,
um, when I was 11, uh, in a literally in a
uh,
pencil written letter to say, "Hey, you guys should do, the Justice League should fight the
mm,
Avengers," because obviously in my 11-year-old wisdom, nobody had ever thought of that, and I
mm,
needed to tell them. But the, it was the sort of, it was the sort of project where you get a phone call to say, "We've agreed to do this."
mm.
As corporate entities, we've agreed to do this. Do you want to be one of the writers?
Yeah,
And obviously you say yes.
that's amazing. Now, like, what were was because comics were slightly different at that time. I feel like now there's a maybe a lot more pressure because it's like, listen, these precious IPs are becoming these larger than life movies and series on TV and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, comics were just comics then.
Yeah.
Comics weren't
Mm,
multi-billion-dollar media franchises, as they are now. So we were just doing comics for the sake of comics.
mm.
And I'm not saying that's not a value judgment. I'm not saying one is better than the
Right,
other.
right.
Thank God the rest of the world has caught up with our little secret corner of pop culture. And what's the number one box office movie? Well, Captain America. When I was a kid, Captain America, had like fake ears on his motorcycle helmet,
Right.
on a CBS movie of the week.
Hmm.
So it's an entirely different landscape. The characters are very much the characters, but the value and the landscape of them is completely different. We were doing Marvel and DC. We were probably the last gasp of just doing comics. Because as
Yeah.
soon as these became multi-million dollar box office hits,
Hmm.
um, every suddenly when there's money to be made, suddenly everybody's interested. Everybody's uh,
Right.
success has many fathers, failures an orphan.
Uh, do you consider that a very bittersweet thing with regards to like your profession, or is it like you're like happy, like, hey, listen, if I can write this thing and it becomes a movie, forget it.
Yeah, and look, it is what it
Hmm.
is. There
Yeah.
was there was a secret handshake quality to being a
Okay.
comic fan when we were just comic fans.
Yeah.
And sort of a satisfaction in, if you wanted that story, if you wanted, Galactus landing in the middle of Manhattan
Hmm.
and threatening to eat the planet, the only place you could get that story was in a comic.
Right. Right. Right.
Now, now you can get that story in a,
Hmm.
fairly cheaply made TV presentation, right?
Right.
Uh, or a lavishly budgeted uh, film that will be
Hmm.
seen by millions of people who will never pick up a comic in their lives. So I'm glad the rest of the world has discovered what we all knew already. Um, but there is, I mean, I saw a quote one time that basically said, the nerds won the culture war,
Hmm.
and our prize is to be an endlessly exploited group of people to go to the box office and lay your money down.
Yeah.
Um, I guess it's a fair trade-off, because now the rest of the world has caught up with us, and I guess I have to be okay with it because that's the way it is.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating time, especially as a fan. Like I grew up as a lifelong fan. Um, and one weird little instance, like years ago when Avengers Endgame came out, I bought my ticket for a showing at 6 in the morning. And my wife was like, "Are you nuts? You're going to be the only one in the theater." I was like, "I don't think so." As soon as I got there, completely sold out. 6 a.m.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
showing. And it was wild, And like that Captain America with the ears that you mentioned, another thing that like I would tell my wife, I'm like, I rented that tape so many times from the video store because that's all we had.
That's
That
all
was
you got, man.
that's all we had, and we were happy
You
with
you
it.
had that. You had Lou Ferrigno painted
Yep.
green.
Yeah.
That was about it. And we were,
Mhm.
you know, not to sound like the cliche curmudgeon, but that's all we had, and we were happy with it.
Yeah, listen, those Channel 4 Hulk movies, man, those were our bread and butter back in the day. I used to love those too. Those are awesome. But now, like now it's like it's such a treasure trove of like everything, and it just doesn't seem like it's gonna stop. And I that makes me very happy as a fan, It's not like I'm saying, bring it back home.
Yeah, I don't.
Mhm.
Everybody was wondering when the bottom was going to drop out of the
Mhm.
superhero thing, and it's like everything else. It's going to have waves and troughs.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to go away because now it's part of the
Mhm.
zeitgeist. It's part of what everybody is aware of, and
Mhm.
the fact that we are regularly um, getting movies that deal with different realities and like all of the stuff that used to be so inside baseball for
Right.
comic,
Yeah.
alternate universes and now it's just
Mhm.
like everybody goes to a movie with like three different Spider-Mans in it
Right.
because they come from different worlds and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I get that." It's just
Mhm.
it's just normal now. Whereas if you would, 20 years ago, if you tried to explain that to somebody, you would just get blank stares. The example I always use is, 25 years ago, if you said Iron Man, everybody thought Black Sabbath,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody thought about Tony Stark because
Right.
Tony Stark was a C-list character at
Mhm.
best. Iron Man is in like two panels of Marvel versus DC. It
Right.
gives
Yeah.
you a sense of, the cultural importance of that particular character at that time.
Mhm.
Now, everybody knows who Iron Man is. Literally everybody in the world.
Yeah, he's like the guy. And it's funny too because like you went from the classic mirror mirror episode of Star Trek where like, one instance of these guys meeting their counterparts from a different dimension, right? To now it's like movies that are not comics are doing a multiverse.
Yeah, and
Mm.
well, the Doctor Strange movie has multiverse in the title.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever would have thought that? The thing I always say is, like, we not only did we get an Ant-Man movie, we got actually good Ant-Man movies.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Who the hell knew?
Yeah. And listen, three great Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Like when that first one came out, I was like, if this isn't good, like I feel like this is it. This is it for like comic movies. And they rocked. So, and here we are, how many years later?
Yeah, I think the genre is elastic enough that,
Mhm.
and it's permeated the society, the cultural zeitgeist enough that we can kind of do whatever we want with it.
Yeah.
There's room for different interpretations. The boys never would have been possible as a TV property
Hmm.
without other superhero universes saturating everybody's brains and
Right.
sort of getting them in on the ground floor of, oh, this is what a superhero universe is. And now you get something that's sort of uh crazy,
Mhm.
over the top commentary on superhero universes
Right.
like The Boys,
Hmm.
and everybody gets it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating. Like like when all this stuff just happens, it repeats what happened before, like on the print page. It's very fascinating. Like the boys you just mentioned, and then like when the next thing drops, like for example, like Invincible. When Invincible drops on Amazon, it brings, oh, there's more comic book stuff that we didn't even hear of. And here it goes. I feel like it's just gonna be like that for the next God knows how many years. Now, was there anything that you ever wanted to work on and never got a chance to? And is there anything that you would do now as well? Almost like the same kind of thing.
I have been blessed to play with most of the toys at Marvel and DC.
Hmm.
Um, in one way or another, in crossovers, guest appearances, whatever. So I've
Yeah.
gotten to write virtually everybody. I got to write Star Wars. I got to write Conan. So like most of the childhood itches I had
Yeah.
have long been scratched. Um, the two things that I would like to, well, you always want to do more of it, right? Like I'd
Yeah.
be happy to go back and write some more Star Wars because that's what I grew up on. That was
Yeah.
sort of life-changing moment for me was seeing the first movie
Hmm.
in theaters and having the Star Destroyer go over your head for like 3.5 months.
Yeah.
Um, that sort of, oh, I want to do that thing. I want to make up stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've always been a big fan of Tarzan, both the
Hmm.
comics and the movies, as well as the original novels. I read those as a kid growing up, and
Yeah.
that was always, that's always one that, and now I've gotten to write Tarzan on a few different occasions as, crossover with Batman, guest appearance
Hmm.
in the Korak strip that I write for Edgar Rice Burroughs. So Tarzan's always alluring, and I think one of the last things on my bucket list is I want to do a original Star Trek story at some point, just because, you know, growing up in upstate New York, you watch Star Trek on Channel 11 at 6 o'clock every night. That
Yeah.
was the ritual. And that also had a big imprint on me as a kid. So I think if there's one thing on the list is like I just want to write, Kirk and Spock and McCoy
Hmm.
doing something, even if it's for 10 pages.
So you would do original Trek.
Yeah, original Trek is my flavor.
Yeah.
I like all of it, but
Hmm.
again, it's what you discover at the right age. And
Yeah. Yeah.
original Trek was what I discovered at the right age, and I appreciate the others.
Hmm.
Um, I like the others. I love the original.
Yeah, I would love to see that, to be honest with you. Like, I'm a huge Star Trek guy also, and like, but same thing. Like, I have an older brother, so like, I got into it through him. And the Star Trek comics now are pretty excellent. I feel like
Yeah, oh
IDW,
yeah,
like I think IDW would it would be a no-brainer to scoop you up and say like, hey, Ron, write something, you know?
yeah. Just
Mhm.
there. I do know other writers who like don't want to touch the properties that they love.
Yeah,
Because you sometimes you get a peek behind the curtain and it's not a good experience. And
yeah.
I have not had a bad experience. Star Wars, Conan,
Mhm.
any of the well, look, it's all licensed stuff. Marvel and
Right,
DC
yeah.
versus are licensed stuff in that sense too. But the stuff that like is from another media that's pulled into comics, I have not had a bad experience with at all. In fact, I love doing the Star Wars stuff. They really
Mhm.
gave me a lot of latitude in what I was doing. Same thing for the Conan stuff that I've
Yeah.
written, and I'm doing stuff for the Savage Sword of Conan magazine now.
Very excited for
Um,
that. Yeah.
so yeah, it's all. I think a lot of it is what you make of it and who you're working with. And if you have the trust of the licensor, of the people that actually own the thing,
Yeah.
as I've had, thankfully, luckily, um, it's a good experience. It's you get to play with the toys that you love best.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like with regards to the Conan stuff, I feel like Titan is doing such a tremendous job with all the stuff that they're putting out,
Yeah,
and
Titan is really the publisher.
yeah,
Editorially, it's really handled by Heroic Signatures,
right,
which
right.
owns
Mhm.
all the Howard stuff. And those guys have been great to deal with. They are very creator friendly, and
Mhm.
they kind of let us do what we do. They let us do our jobs, which is really all that you can ask for.
Yeah,
As a creator, when you when the editor trusts you enough to not talk to you, uh,
right. Yeah,
that's awesome. You just get to go do your thing, and go, here it is. This cool. Most of the time, it works out great.
that's awesome. I love to hear that. What was the transition like going into video games? Because you did, for example, like I'm just gonna say Diablo because I love Diablo. But like, how did that come about?
I've worked on and off in video games for 10 or 12 years.
Mhm.
There's a number of local developers here,
Mhm.
near where I live in Albany. And I got pulled into, hey, do you want to come help us make a video game? Because I knew a guy who knew a guy who,
Mhm.
as with most things, it's not necessarily who you know, but it is who you've met.
Right. Yeah.
There was on one of the gigs was a former Marvel editor working as a producer at the local video game company, which was called Vicarious Visions.
Mhm.
So I got pulled into that to work on the Spider-Man game, to work on Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2.
Yeah.
Um, and then that led to working on other games for them. Skylanders, did some work on Destiny.
Yeah.
So they would call me in when they needed help, when they needed somebody to uh, help them get projects across the finish line.
Yeah.
Um, and that developer was eventually bought by Activision Blizzard.
Hmm.
And then the studio was handed over to Blizzard to work on Diablo. And that's when I got a call to say, "Hey, do you want to be a staff writer on Diablo?" Which again is a question that you say yes to.
Now, is that like a writer's room situation, or is that like kind? Because like I feel like video game scripts are like, I don't know, like 15,000 pages long.
It's a writer's room, but everybody kind of, I mean, look, I've been doing this for a while, and I still don't know how we make video games.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's an opaque process to me because everybody does their bit,
Hmm.
their little end uh of the project, and somehow it all comes together in this, AAA multi-million dollar game. So it's a writer's room. The narrative team for Diablo, there's some here in Albany, and there's the rest are in California. And you sort of divvy up who's going to do what and what projects you're working on.
Hmm.
Um, there's some overlap, and everybody helps out everybody else. But you know, when you make a comic, you make it with 4 or 5 other people. That's it.
Yeah.
And you make a video game, and you make it with hundreds of other people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so you interface with um, designers and artists and animators, and just so many different people who do so many different aspects of the game. And um, our job is the story and the characters, and trying to make sure that the story is as engaging as possible, and that the characters are as attractive as possible in terms of having an
Hmm.
emotional experience with the game, and feeling like you want to spend time with these people, even if they're villains. Like,
Right.
everybody, we want to breathe life into all of these characters rather than just have it be a shoot 'em up or a hack and slash. Um, the idea is that if the gameplay is awesome, and we have another layer of narrative on top of it that really pulls you into it, that's the goal, is to make it a satisfying gameplay experience, as well as a satisfying narrative experience, and a satisfying emotional experience, because you're on this journey with these characters, and we want you to feel something for it. Um, we want you to uh, feel bad when something bad happens, and we want
Hmm.
you to triumph when something good happens. Um, the jobs are not that different. They're different in how you execute them,
Yeah.
but at the core of it, it's storytelling, and it's taking the audience on an emotional journey that hopefully feels satisfying by the time you get to the end of it.
Well, I mean, the word journey is very astute because video games now are hundreds of hours long, So there's so dense at this point where absolutely.
Well, sure.
Mhm.
Obviously the idea is to make sure that the players
Mhm.
get their money's worth out
Yeah.
of it. So the games are dense, and there's a lot of content, and hopefully a lot of varied content, so
Mhm.
that there's no redundancy, so that it's not boring for the player to, get from point A to point B through the game.
Right. That's fantastic. Thank you for clearing that up also. So a couple more things and then I'll get you out of here. I'm sure you're busy. You're a teacher, right?
Yeah, I teach people to write comics.
Yeah, in Manhattan. Am I wrong about that?
Well, it's online, but
It's
the
okay. Yeah,
studio
yeah.
itself is in
Okay.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
Um, and that started. It's called the Jacob Kruger Studio.
Yeah.
And again, I knew a guy who knew somebody who knew the Jacob Kruger Studio, who
Uh,
knew specifically Jacob Kruger, and they were looking for somebody to, it's a screenwriting school. So, screenplays, teleplays, stage plays, but they were looking for somebody who could do some comic classes. And they came to me and we worked out, the parameters and how it would work. And just as we were getting ready to do that, we had a pandemic.
Oh
So
boy, yeah.
it all went online, and it turned out to be great to do it online because then anybody could do it. You didn't have to be in Manhattan and show
Right.
up, show up downtown somewhere for 3 hours once a week. Um, it forced me to sit down and figure out how I do what I do and why I do what I do,
Okay.
uh, which was a learning curve for me because you know, a lot of it was taught to me by Starlin, and then a lot of it was just instinctual.
Mhm.
Um, you teach yourself to do this as you move along doing it. And so I had to sit down and go, well, why do I do that thing? Why do I approach it that way?
Mhm.
Um, so it forced me to, think about the the parameters and the methods of doing this and the sequence that you follow to do this. So, I teach people how I write comics, and then I tell them,
Mhm.
you adapt it how best works for you. So I've done that. I've done that quite a bit. I've done it for Kruger Studio. I've done the same type of thing for United Arab Emirates, which is for Sandstorm Publishing, which has
Mhm.
um, brought me in to do workshops and classes with, frankly, anybody who wanted to learn how to write comics. So I guess I'm a teacher. We're all students and we're all teachers, I guess.
It sounds like you're a teacher. If you're doing an online course, it sounds like you're a teacher. 100%. That's awesome. Like, could anybody like sign up for the any of the classes, or is it specifically
Yeah, the
for the
the the Kruger Studio, I think it's just you can just Google Jacob Kruger, Krueger Studio
Mhm.
in Manhattan, and my pictures on the staff page and all that. And we do, we offer the classes not as regularly as we used to when everybody was cooped up inside their houses and couldn't go anywhere. But
Yeah.
we offer the classes, and I do like one-on-one mentorships and workshops and stuff like that. And then when Sandstorm does their version of it, there's usually signups as well. I don't know when the next one of that's going to be, but it's satisfying. I've had a number of students who have taken the course and then maybe moved to a workshop and or like mentorship situation, and
Mhm.
help them bring their comic to fruition, which means, they get it drawn, they get it lettered and colored and get it printed, and then they hold it. They hold it in their hands, and
Mhm.
that's the real, that's the dream comes true part, is when you get to hold your own comic in your hands, and not to be, too sentimental about it or Pollyannish, but it's really satisfying when somebody that you've helped along in the process sends you their book, and they'd say, I this is the thing I made. It's cool because
Mhm.
anytime, more comics in the world is good, and people being proud of the work that they bring into the world is awesome.
I love that. I think that's the perfect way to end this. Do you want to leave with anything else?
No, if that's a good, end cap, I continue to work on Diablo. There's always more of that. There's more comics coming, some of which have been announced, some of which haven't. But like I said, for the most part, I haven't worked an honest day in my life. So, you know, being able to, my job is to make stuff up, and people still pay me for it. So I'm the luckiest man in the world, really.
Well, you're pretty fantastic at making stuff up, Ron. I really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, dude.
Cool, man. Yeah, Ron's the man. I hope I get to talk to him again in the future. That was a lot of fun. I hope Ron had a great time. I did. I definitely did as a fan. Listen, guys, this week, a lot of good comics have come out. We are still in an era of an embarrassment of riches right off the top of the bat. Let's see. Ninja Turtles #7. Great friggin' series. I love it. I think I've talked about it every single week that I've been doing this. Department of Truth, another banger. Really love that. Savage Sword of Conan also might be one of my favorite reads of all time. I like getting all like kind of cozy under the blankets and reading about high adventure. That's been a lot of fun. Ultimate Spider-Man, arguably my book of the millennium, let's call it that. I think you guys should really definitely go out and pick up Ultimate Spider-Man. It's been effing fantastic. Justice League Unlimited has been great. Superman has been great. There's a lot of good stuff coming out from every company. Detective has been fantastic with Tom Taylor taking over. Batman Long Halloween, Black Canary. We're getting a lot of good stuff from the big two lately. And I've been reading a lot more DC than I ever have. Other than that, guys, check out the next episode. I believe David Pepos, I think it's Pepos, will return and come and hang out and chat what he's working on. The last time I talked to him was a few years ago. And listen, he's been up to some crazy stuff lately. Guys, subscribe. The name of the channel, BTC Rich X. It's Behind the Counter 2.0. You can find me on X at BTC Rich. You can find me on Bluesky at BTC Rich. Like and subscribe. I would love to be able to do a live show with a couple of creators just BSing on YouTube for you guys. I think that would be a lot of fun. Guys, check out Matt Men Podcast and check out Beyond the Bell, 2 shows I co-host with Andrew Zarian, one over on Fightful and one over on YouTube. And also this week will be Matt Men's return to F4W Online, so please go check that out. And listen, if you have Peacock, watch all the SNL 50 stuff. It's all pretty awesome. That's about it for me, folks. I'll talk to you later. Mwah.